All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott. The class is AWD1112, Java Android Programming. In the previous lesson, I went over Chapter 13, which talked about security and performance, etc. And now I'm going to go into Chapter 14. Just so you know the plan for this week, I'm lecturing on 13 and 14 today, and I will lecture on 15 tomorrow. So by tomorrow at around 7 o'clock or so, all of this information should be out there on my YouTube channel. In addition, in class today, Monday, the 3rd of May, I am going to go over the example program that I talked to you about, which is an SQL to-do list. It's very simplistic. I'm currently working on a Firebase project that allows you to create a simple database and also be able to log in, log out, etc. All right, and sign up for an account so you can see that as well. I'll do the best I can to get that done, and then if I do get it done, we will go over that on Wednesday. Tomorrow, what I hope to do, and Angie, I'm hoping that you'll be able to follow along with this if you're physically able to do so, and that is I'm going to go over Chapter 15, which talks to us about how we can take our app and upload it to the Google Play Store. So before that, Chapter 14, Firebase and AdMob. And just so you know, AdMob is short for AdMobile, and it's the way that you can basically set up your app so that it allows you to put ads on it. When you do that, it's a way that you can help monetize or make money from your app. All right. But the first thing I want to quickly do here is I want to go in here and I want to go into I'm just going to type in Firebase right here. And the first thing that comes up is firebase.google.com. Now, a couple things about this. As mentioned, Firebase is under the guise or owned by, I think, however you want to say it, Google. It is designed to work not only with Android apps, but also iOS apps and web apps. So in other words, you can use it with JavaScript, for example. There's a get started here, which is what the link we're going to do. There is a demo that's in here that I went through it yesterday. I didn't think was very good. And there's a watch video. Now with the watch video, it's only 2 or 3 minutes long. So if you think it's worth your time, take a quick look at it. Firebase is the name of a suite of products. We're going to look at the real-time database in here because it's the one that I just happened to be using. There's also something that's called Firestore, which basically is going to, if it hasn't already, it's designed to replace what we're going to do. All right. So some of the things that you can do in here, again, they've got all of their products, etc. I'm not going to go through this, but again, these are different things. You can notice that a lot of companies are using this. So if you want more, this guy, I don't know what his name is. It says, yeah, I knew it was something with Puff. It's Frank Van Puffelen, and I know it sounds a little funky, but he's got a lot of stuff out there. So if you're interested, this is how I started on my trek to this stuff. I went in here and I typed in Firebase tutorial, and there's a lot of them, as you'd probably guess. This beginner's guide is pretty good. It's about 20 minutes long. Somewhere in here, of course I won't be able to find it now. This is it. But the thing is, it's 5 years old, and what Mr. Van Puffelen does in here is he creates an entire chat app in about 45 minutes. It's good, he's entertaining, but it's a little bit outdated. All right, so now, one thing about, or two things, and then we're going to get started. First thing is this is a NoSQL or NoSQL database. So rather than working with tables, relations, etc., it works with documents. And if you don't understand what that means, you'll understand at least partially as we go on in here. So that's the first thing to realize. And again, if you've never worked with NoSQL databases before, it's different. It's another way of looking at things. Also, as I mentioned, this is designed, this software is, Firebase is basically the collection of everything. And we'll look at the real-time database. There's also Firestore, all right? And we're going to look at a bit of this as we get going in here, All right. So getting started with Firebase, analytics. You don't have to turn them on. We'll turn them on, but we won't do anything with them. What's cool about analytics is if you run analytics on your app, and if you've got a lot of people, so you create an app and a lot of people download it. And if you've got analytics set up on the app, well, you can go in there and you can look and see, okay, on this app, what pages are people looking at? How much time are they spending on each page? How many times did they go out to the site? I've oftentimes mentioned this, that there is a big difference between having 500 different people look at your website once and having one person look at your site 500 times. Notifications, all right, this is a real-time system. So even if you're not logged in right now, all right, what can happen is if you can send notifications out to users, it can cache them in the memory of the computer, and when they log on and get onto the app, and even if they're not logged onto the app, they can get notifications. Again, we'll talk about the real-time database in just a minute. They have a test lab and a demo in here. They're not that great. They're not that bad. All right. Then they get into this monetization idea. Again, making money from your app. Now, one thing about the way that Google Play is set up, I think I've said this in class before, but I want to say it again, and that is that if you put your app out there and you put it out there for free, you cannot pull it back again later and then want to charge for it. So there's different ways that you can get around this. You can put out a free version that's pretty stripped down, for example, and then ask users if they want to pay for a version with more bells and whistles in it. All right. Or you can just charge from the get-go. You can take an app that's out there that you are charging for and later make it free. All right. Talk about additional Firebase features, where to learn more, etc. And then this AdMob stuff. All right. So as it says, the lesson again is broken into 3 different topics. First, Firebase. Notice again a set of tools for mobile and web app developers. Second, how to monetize or make money from your Android app. And third, running ads using AdMob. Now, Firebase, as it says, it's a set of tools for all sorts of developers. As mentioned, it can be used for iOS, for web apps. One of the things that you're going to be asked when you start bringing all this stuff in here is, what kind of app are you building? Are you building a web app or an iOS app or an Android app? And of course, in here, we would always choose an Android app. All right. As an Android developer, you use Android Studio to build your app, but you can use Firebase to add features to your app. This will ideally, as it says here, get you a wider audience, allow you to test your app, earn revenue, and get analytics. This chapter does not discuss everything about Firebase. Heck, it's about 20 pages long at most. So you can buy books on it. There are very good articles out there. I found a few tutorials I've gone through. They're so-so. They're not bad. All right. This chapter is designed, as it says, to introduce Firebase, help you get started using it, and highlighting important features that you might want to use. This is where I had you go. All right. So we went out here. Now, it does assume that if you're going to use this, that you have some kind of a Google account, Gmail typically. All right, so I'm logged in here, and I'm in here from one of my Rankin Gmail accounts. Okay, but if you don't have one, you'd have to go out first and get yourself a Gmail account. I'm going to guess that both of you have one already anyway. So as it says, the first time you come out here, and again, realize this is a couple years old. So this, and then if you look at what we had, the picture's a little different, but the ideas are the same. One thing about Firebase is it's got a very extensive documentation system. So as it says there, if you view the documents, there's all sorts of stuff that's in here, guides, etc. All right, notice code labs. I watched the thing here. I would suggest you watch this as well. But I went out onto YouTube, and what did I watch this weekend? I went out to that Android India, and out there And it's interesting because it's right at the end here. So I went out and I watched the permissions, which is okay. There are no example programs, but it's very high level, but it's not bad at all. Then I watched the Firebase and AdMob, all right, and that I thought was actually pretty good. And then I've just started watching the Publishing Your App. But out of the 3 people that are in here,
we covered a lot.
It's interesting because you've heard many of these things, or you watched them with the gentleman here and the lady here, but the last few are all done by the lady over here. All right, not that that's a big thing one way or the other. She does a fine job. All right, so you go out there, and one of the things you can do, as it says, is create a new project. So to use Firebase features in your app, you must first create a Firebase object and then add your Android app. That is not true. You can create the Android app first and then add the Firebase project to it. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. All right, the plan is when I come in here tomorrow, I would like to immediately, because I've got all my steps written down on here, the code that I have to add, etc. And as you can see, it is literally about 400 lines long about what I want to do. And what if it works, and I'm hoping, of course, that it does, but if it all works, I'm going to give you the project. All right, so you've got something to take a look at. So when you click the Create New Project, you give it any name you want. It's not that big of a thing. What I will do, and what is I think makes sense, is whatever you've called your Android project to make this project have the same name, although it's not mandatory to do that. I don't believe it asks anymore for your country or region, but it might. We'll go through all this tomorrow. All right, then you click Create Project, which opens up the Firebase console, and it's got a lot of information that's in here. Remember the stuff that's along the side here, because we will actually end up looking at that a little bit later. So then you come in and it says, well, what do you want to add it to? And of course, we will be choosing Add Firebase to your Android apps. All right. If you want to learn more about analytics, which I'm not going to really cover at all other than to turn it on, and authentication, and I am going to talk about that. So you might want to go and look at more about authentication. All right. So add your Android app to your Firebase project. The next step, as it says, is to associate them. First, though, get the information you will need to connect. You will need to know the package name in your app. Well, that's why, to me, it makes sense to create your project first, because you will be asked to put in the name of the associated package. All right, it says it's best to have your app open in Android Studio before you start the process. So to connect your Firebase project and your Android app together, in Android, as it says, open up your app. Make sure you've got the latest Google Play services installed. We're not going to worry about that. Not right now, at least. All right. But we'll note the package, and then in the console, we'll click Add Firebase to your Android app. All right. So that'll be right here, and it'll start walking us through a list of steps. Okay. One of the first things that's going to happen is it's going to ask you to enter that package name. That package name has to be, so for instance, here, this would be my package name. If I was doing the one with SQLite, the one that I'm going to do is probably going to just be called like Firebase Demo. All right. So it'll be edu.rankin.jpscott.firebase demo type of thing, but you have to copy it in there exactly. So there are certain things that have to be followed. Click Add App, as it says. Save it to a convenient location. There's other things that you're going to be asked to do. Now, I'd say if you really want to get the full gist of this, and you want a lot more than I'm going to be able to give you in a half an hour or so of lecture, then I would go out to YouTube and I would search for Mr. Smith. I would actually recommend, especially for you, Angie, that you subscribe to his channel, because he does fantastic lectures. But somewhere in here, and now it used to be right up in the front, but I haven't seen it lately. So let's see if it still has. Yeah, I don't know where he's put it, to be honest with you. So I'll have to take a look in here. But he has a thing that he's done that's almost 2 hours long on Firebase. He goes through some steps that I'm going to skip. All right. But if you want maybe a little bit more in-depth detail, you might want to watch his lecture. All right. Now, when you start going in here, what's going to happen is you're going to be told sooner or later that you've got to go in and you've got to add a couple different lines to your build Gradle files. Now this is different from what we've done before. And what I mean by this is if I come over here and I go and open up my project window here, whoops, this was already open, and I go into my Gradle scripts, I have to change both the build Gradle for the project. So this one, I've got to add a class path to it. All right, and my build Gradle module level, I have to add some dependencies in here. So we have to add things to two different build Gradle files. That's the first time, and I guess the only time, we've had to or will have to do that. All right. All right, Firebase Analytics, again, we'll take a look at that and we'll see how to turn it on, which again, as it says, we'll add a dependency. With some of these things, when it'll just ask if we want to add things, and if we tell it to accept changes, it'll basically go through the process of adding it to the Gradle file, and I believe even syncing it. Other times, we're going to have to add them ourselves and then do the sync. All right. So they talk a little bit about analytics and some of the stuff that you can see here. Again, I didn't want to spend too much time on this, but notice how many people are using the app, the devices they're using, where they're located, demographics, and things like gender, etc. All right, the version, how engaged they are in the app, which can be important, and there's other stuff too. All right, so there's examples of the analytics that you might see. All right. And there's other kinds of analytic data. I'm not going to read this to you. You can take a look at it as you may or may not be interested in it. All right, notifications I briefly touched on, but as it says, you learned in a previous lesson how to enable your app to send notifications to a user. Using the Firebase console, you can send notifications to all users or a subset of the users. Why is that important? Well, let's suppose for a minute that you have set up your application so that once the user buys your app, they not only get the app, but they get any updates to it. And now you've made an update to your app. Well, you might want to send out just a mass notification to anyone who has downloaded the app that it has been updated. If they want the latest and greatest feature, they can do this. Or if, in the worst case, if you find there's a problem with your app, you can also send out a notification and let people know. Behind the scenes, as it says, Firebase uses Firebase Cloud Messaging, which is another thing that's provided by it. You can click here, again, to get more, to send notification to targeted devices. Now, notice the best practices for sending notifications. It says the same kind of best practices are true for sending notifications from the Firebase console as they are for sending notifications from the app. Be considerate. Only send out a notification, if it's important. I mean, if you've got a new version, but it looks a lot like the old version and you really don't have to upgrade, you might want to wait or just send out limited notifications. But if you consider them to be important, again, send them out. Do not irritate your users by sending too many notifications or notifications with unhelpful or annoying content, or that just turn them off. Or even worse, they'll uninstall your app. All right, one of the reasons that we're going through the Firebase real-time database example rather than Firestore in here is that's what they talk about in here. So what we've done so far, we've looked at things like shared preferences, using saving data as key value pairs. We've looked at how you can use content providers for data. We've looked at how you can save to your file system. We've looked at SQLite. The problem with SQLite is since it's on the actual machine itself and it's part of Android, if I create this, I can give you a copy of my to-do list, but that said, it's your copy you're going to be running. It's an SQL database that's not, what's the word I'm looking for? Shareable, I guess. All right. So Firebase offers a database that provides cloud-based storage, allowing clients to stay in sync as the data changes. Even if the app goes offline, the data remains available. So in other words, let's suppose, Keegan, for yours, as an example, that you add something to your app where you have the person who's made the most money off of bets playing their blackjack game. All right. Well, you can put that out there and you can constantly be updating it or have the app update it. Okay. And then when people get into your app, they can get the most latest and greatest up-to-date features to find out who's made the most money. Not the greatest of examples, but it works. So when an app is off, so it's not connected to the internet or you've got it off, etc., the data is synced. So anytime you make a change, it's kind of like, look at it this way, that anytime the master makes a change, the children see the changes right away. All right. So this, again, is what I'd shown you before. In other words, that's out here. We are going to end up getting to this and going to the Firebase, real-time database. So since it's a NoSQL database, all right, you've got to store the data someplace. Well, the data is stored, as it says, as JSON objects, JSON being JavaScript object notation. And as mentioned here, you can think of a database as a cloud-hosted JSON tree. The example that I'm going to run through with you is, again, a very simplistic one. We are first going to see how to set up a database. It'll have two fields in it, a first name and a last name. This was the start of what I wanted to put in for something like a payroll database. So later you could go in and you could add employee number, you could add department ID or department name or whatever, salary, hours worked, etc. But we're keeping it unbelievably simplistic. In here, they use a JSON object that's going in. If you look, this is the beginning of the object. This is the end of the object. All right. And this object contains both books and movies. So you'll notice this is books and it goes all the way in here. Books is made up of different book objects. We've got 3 of them in here. Each book object has a title and an author. And again, in the examples, some of the examples, they do things like that. They might use movies with titles and genres, etc. There's a lot of different ways you see this kind of thing set up. If you set it up, and eventually this is what we're going to get to, and I don't like the way that they put it in here, we're going to not just have book 1, book 3, book 2, etc. That's all fine and dandy. And you'll notice that even though it's book 1, 2, and 3, that here it looks like it's in its book 1, 3, and 2. That doesn't matter. What we're going to do is we're going to see how we can automatically add an ID for us. Now, the ID that you get in a NoSQL database, Keegan knows this from last semester when we were working with MongoDB, but Angie, you haven't seen it. The keys end up looking pretty bad. In other words, they're pretty long, and they're a sequence of letters and numbers. All right? Okay. It says when you write code to access the database, you retrieve the data items by their location. All right. And the good news is look at this. Even as we drill our way into here. So the author of book 1 is 2 activities fire. So this is the name of the data of the project, the name of the database, data, books, book 1 author. So that would literally be for books, that would be book 1 author. So that would be Jane developer right here. But you see, there's not a lot of fluff and a lot of stuff that you really don't need. All right. Getting and setting data, as it says, you can use the Firebase console to both view and update data in the database. What you're going to see is you can literally come in here after you've done this and click on one of these fields. And let's say that I wanted it to say Jane D developer. I can click in here and change this from Jane developer to Jane D developer, and it'll immediately be reflected in the database. All right. As it says, your app can use API calls to get and set data in the Firebase, in the database rather. You're going to see that. So viewing and writing data in the console, this is what I mentioned. So when you click on these things, you'll notice it comes up in basically the equivalent of an editable text box where you can go in and make changes on an as-needed type of basis. Notice you can also import and export data to the console. So if you had a JSON file that you wanted to use as your database, you could bring it in if somebody else had already created it. Be aware that if you import a JSON file, it overwrites any data. Well, not only that, if I decide here, for example, I don't want this book anymore, all right? And so it looks like this is book 4. I can click that X, and immediately it'll just remove that particular record. It's not really a record, all right? Again, these are known as documents, and we talk about that more in our class in the 3rd semester. So, reading and writing data to your app. As it says, to use a Firebase database in your app, add the Firebase database library to your app, and then use methods for data reference. All right. And again, it says you can add the dependency yourself into the build Gradle module. All right. You'll see when we go through this tomorrow how this is done. All right. What I'm planning on doing again tomorrow is to go through all my steps. I'm going to print out that list and I'm going to go through the project. And either it's going to work really well or it'll be a flaming failure. But either way, you'll be allowed to see it in real time to see exactly what I've done. So the easiest way to construct and handle data is to create a Java object or a class. So this would be book. Again, you notice from before the books had a title and an author. Each is a string. You must create a default constructor when you use Firebase. Even if you're not going to be using it to do anything, you still need to put it in there because it's expected by the software. And then here's our regular constructor where we pass in a title and an author. All right. To access the data in your Android app, it says you use the methods in the database reference class. So you're going to see these. I'm not going to run through any of them right now, but if you want a little bit more of an example, you can look. Okay, notice there's a set, there's a child to access child nodes, etc. So as they mention here, suppose you wanted to add a new book. So the ID would be book 4. The title would be how to edit data, and the author would be an editor. And they're showing you how you can add this. We're going to do something similar to this in that we will want to be getting a reference to Firebase, getting an instance. All right. So this is allowing us basically to get the books database in here. Then we're defining a method called add new book. You're going to see this as we go through because I tried, again, I've only gotten this partially done, so I'm not sure for certain if 100% of it will work or not, but hopefully it will. All right. So as it says, Firebase provides a set of rules to determine who is allowed to view and update the database. And when you get started with the database rules, typically what you're asked when you start up the authentication is how you want to set it up. In other words, do you want it to be in a mode where anybody can see the stuff, or do you want it to be in the mode when you've got control? And typically you leave it open for anyone and everyone when you're testing, and then you close it up, all right, once you're ready to put it out to production. Firebase has a test lab, as it's mentioned there. It lets you test your app on a wide range of devices and get reports on the result. This can be especially important if you're going to be doing some kind of an app that deals with IoT or the Internet of Things, which basically, again, allows us to create apps that would run on any kind of a device and even things like appliances. All right, now they go through the test lab. I'm not going to go through that. I have not used it. All right. But if you look at a lot of the different tapes and stuff that are out there, you'll see you can view how to use that if you want to do that. So it says there is a public Firebase demo project that you can use to explore Firebase, the Firebase console. I think this is the one they're talking about, which is it's learn Firebase in a weekend. I'll tell you that it's going to be a long weekend if you do that. And what I mean by that is I went through day 1 of it, and it takes a few hours to go through if you want to read the documentation that goes along with it and understand what's going on. All right, build a simple chat app, real-time chat app. All right, as it says here, Firebase has many more tools to help you develop your app. Notice this is that one I mentioned to you, the Firebase in a weekend. It's a little hokey at the beginning. This Mr. Van Pufflin and another guy are sitting around, or I shouldn't say sitting, they're standing, and the one guy acts like he's flipping burgers, and they say, what are you going to do this weekend? And then Van Pufflin says, I'm going to build an app. And that's basically where it goes from. All right. So if you want more on Firebase, They've got some really, basically this is going to the stuff on the main page and other pages as well. There's a lot of really good information that's out there on the system. All right. So to make money, as it says, if the idea is, you want people to um, buy your app, well, how do you do that? All right. Well, there's different ways, there's different things you can do. And they talk about in here about 4 of them. Number 1 is the premium. As it says, users pay to download the app. All right. And notice usually it's a one-time cost, but it may or may not be. I mean, if you make major modifications, you might ask them to pay more, but you may not. All right. There's what's called freemium, where the app is free, but you get just the original version. And if they want upgrades and to be able to do other things, then they have to pay. There's subscriptions. All right, you've all probably gone through some kind of a software subscription where you pay typically like an annual fee. Finally, there's ads, as it says, where the app is free, but it displays ads, and you really can't get rid of those. All right, so again, with premium apps, you pay up front to download the app. All right. Be aware, as it says, that some users will refuse to download an app if they have to pay for it, or if they cannot try it first free of charge. Sometimes you see that kind of thing where you do put it out there for free, but it basically expires in 24 hours or whatever. Freemium apps, again, as mentioned right here, it's a compromise between a free app and one that you charge for. Notice the app is available for an installation free of charge, but with limited functionality, or again, for a limited duration. Another way, as it says, to make money from a freemium app is to provide in-app purchases. For a game, your app might offer new content levels for the game or make new items for the game to be more fun. Subscriptions, which is again a recurring type of fee, typically annually, but it could be something else as well. And ads, which, as it says, one common monetization strategy is to provide your app free of charge, but to run ads on it rather. The best way to do this, and this is what the chapter I believe ends with, is by talking about AdMob. Again, AdMob, which stands for ads on mobile. All right, it says Google provides tools for advertisers to create ads and to find the targeting criteria for their ads. All right, so in other words, it's going to do this based on either a geographic demographic or maybe an age demographic, etc. So it'll come in there with ads accordingly. So to display an ad in your app, it says you add an ad view in the layout of the activity. It's a small place that you're going to put on your screen, and you have to put in a small amount of boilerplate code that's going to put in the ads. It says you don't have to worry about finding an ad to display because Google will handle it for you. Google pays you when users click in your app. So if they click on an ad, you might get a couple cents or whatever. The exact amount, as mentioned there, depends on the ads that get shown and how much the advertisers are willing to pay. All right. Don't click on ads in your own app. Google has policies that prevent the publishers from clicking on their own ads to try to make money or whatever. The advertisers pay when people click ads, so it would not be fair for you to display an ad in your app, then click on it yourself. So if you want the policies, you can go out here. Then they go through the steps. I have not done this. But as it says, before you can experiment with running ads in your app, you need to enable AdMob. So they show you how to do this. In the Firebase console, select AdMob from the left-hand navigation that comes up in here. So in here. You might have to look for it. I don't know because I haven't done anything with it yet. All right. Follow the sign-up wizard to create your AdMob account and add your app to AdMob. To display your ad in the app, you need your AdMob app ID and ad unit ID, which you can get from the console. And then they go through how to do this. Again, I don't want to read these to you. Ideally, if you want more about AdMob, you can take a look at what's in here. So tomorrow when I come in, or I might even do it tonight, I don't know, but I'm going to go over chapter 15 in here, which is on how to publish. Now, I've done a couple videos on this. I did one last year, I did one the year before, I did one the year before that. I'm going to put a link in to the one that I have out there from last year, but I'm going to attempt in class tomorrow, probably go and take like the BMI app and just see if we can publish that out to the Google Play Store. All right, so we'll go through all of this stuff. It's about 50, I think the last page is 434. So what? It's about 13 or 14 pages. So we will go through that stuff tomorrow. All right, so for today, you should have, hopefully very soon, you should have the URL links to both chapter 13, which was on performance, etc., security, and chapter 15. So let me just come back here. So today, again, I went over lesson 13, permissions, performance, and security, and that should be out there soon. And chapter 14, Firebase and AdMob. And tomorrow we'll go over chapter 15, which will be the last lecture I do. And again, I'm hoping tomorrow that we can go through and actually publish an existing app. And on Wednesday, I'm hoping to have the Firebase thing that I'm working on done, and you'll have a copy of that as well. Okay, that's it.